Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Arc. I am Ashley Nicole Moss, and I am joined by John Gonzalez. And we're not fighting just yet because we haven't started discussing 76ers Knicks, but I also don't like to punch down. I'm up 2-0. So I like to go ahead and show some class when it comes to winning. How you doing, John?
You start the show by saying you're not gonna punch down, and then you punch down.
Yeah, I'm not a complete, angel.
I I got too many New Yorkers in my life, Ash. I told you this yesterday. I popped on with your previous pals, your pals from Knicks Fan TV, and it's just like I can't get away from you guys right now. It's killing me.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's going to be real killing you after we discuss this, next time after game 3. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. First, the story of the night, I feel like. 2 really good games on last night. OKC, Pelicans, a little bit of a blowout, but really fun if you just enjoy watching a young team kind of come into their own. But the biggest story of the night was the upset of the Miami Heat tying the series in Boston, TD Garden, in front of a lot of pissed off Celtics fans, which makes me happy as a New Yorker. But then again, it's Miami, so I'm kind of torn on it. But the biggest story of the night, of that game rather, Miami's 3-point shooting was absolutely insane. 23 3-pointers, playoff franchise record. They came in as a 14-point underdog. So it is the biggest playoff upset since the Clippers beat the Warriors as a 15-point underdog in 2019. Another cool stat that I found, Eric Spoelstra is now 10-3 in game 2s after losing game 1s. I mean, John, crazy night for the Miami Heat.
Yeah, this is something we can actually agree on, that it's fun for people from New York and Philadelphia to see Boston lose. I lived in Boston for 4 years. I have a lot of friends in Boston. I've said this before. They're all the worst, and they haven't shut up all season long. And so to watch this team, the Miami Heat, who a lot of people, me included, wrote them off when Jimmy went down, Ash. I was like, there's no way they're going to get swept. This is brutal. And I think we forgot, Spo's amazing. Like, he game plan. Now, you can't really game plan, you're going to make 53.5% of your threes, but you can game plan how many you're going to take. And Tyler Hero was on one last night. Bam Adebayo, by the way, is a really good underrated player that people forget about. Like we said, Jimmy went down, and okay, but you still have a guy who's going to make first team all defense in Bam Adebayo, who gives the Celtics serious problems. But Spo having them shoot 43 attempts, that's 10 more than they normally take. And then they limited the Celtics. They only took 32 from 3. That's 10 fewer than they normally take. So game planning that out, he's so good, Ashley. Spo is so good. We should have known that they could get at least one. And for them to get one in Boston, now I think if you're a Celtics fan or the Celtics, you're like, oh man, if they had won a game in Miami, that's one thing, but you just won one on their floor in Boston, and they're going to be thinking about it.
For sure. I mean, listen, I never thought the Miami Heat were going to get swept. I think that if you've watched the Heat play over the years and, being here in Miami and covering that team earlier in my career, that Heat culture is a very real thing. And Eric Spoelstra, like I said, is one of the best, if not the best. There could be an argument as the best game-to-game adjusters in the NBA. Like, he's never going to go ahead and play the same game twice. And he's never going to make sure, and he's always going to make sure his guys are in a different position from game to game. Really interesting stat here, though. The Heat have won 5 of their last 7 playoff games in the TD Garden. And even more interesting is that when you look between this year and last year, Miami now has 4 games versus Boston where they have shot 50% from 3 or better. And that includes guys who normally aren't that kind of a 3-point shooting threat. Now, I say that to say, I still think Boston wins this series. I think in a series of 7, the better team will always win. In this scenario, the Celtics are the better team because I feel like Miami, incredible 3-point shooting. But like I said, those guys aren't normally 3-point shooters. You live by the 3, you die by the 3. You can't rely on the 3 to go ahead and save you game to game. Those balls don't always fall. Boston, like I said, I do think is better, but this goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the pod, earlier in the season, John. Joe Mazzulla, I am not a buyer in what he is selling as a head coach. He got out coached last night. And I know you can't do much when you're draining that much from the 3-point line, but there was multiple parts in those games where slight adjustments could have made all the difference, and he did nothing. I'm not
I
a buyer.
mean, I'm not a huge Joe Mazzulla guy either, but what do you? I mean, they do have an excellent defense. They've had a
They didn't have
fantastic
one last
season.
night.
Well, that's what I mean. And you know what? It's one thing to say that the Heat don't normally take that many threes because they don't normally take that many threes, but they are 12th in 3-point percentage this season. So Spo, I think, looked at it and went, look, the Celtics have, as you mentioned, the better team. They're so incredibly deep. So what's our best chance to like make this a series? And it's probably, all right, we're going to take way more threes than we normally do. And hopefully they'll go in. I mean, because they're not a bad 3-point shooting team. That's just not generally how they attack.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, they're not, they took, as I said, 10 more in last night's game than they normally took per game during the season, but it's not a bad strategy. And like, yeah, Joe Mazzulla needs to adjust and figure out like perimeter defense wise what he's going to do, but he has the guys to throw at them, right? I mean, if you're going to try to clamp down on the Heat, you've got a zillion different looks that you can throw at them defensively with Derek White, who could make all NBA defense, Drew Holiday, who's an incredible defender, the Jays.
I'm glad you mentioned Derek White and Drew Holiday. Derek White was out there trying to put his cape on and save the day. He fell short, but Drew Holiday was a big non-factor, and I think that's probably why a lot of the outcome was not going in the direction of the Boston Celtics. I mean, he didn't have many points on the board, but more importantly, his defense was not, as prolific as it usually is. And as we know, he's one of the greatest defenders in the NBA. It's why Boston wanted him after Milwaukee kind of let him go. So I do think it's an anomaly. Like I said, I do think the better team usually wins in a series of 7, but anybody who thought that this team was going to get swept was highly mistaken.
I thought they were going to get swept. I mean, I guess I was highly mistaken. Yeah. I mean, and it's what I was saying. Like, we should have known better. We should have known better because Spo is a master tactician. We should have known better because they still do have good players on that team. Tyler Hero, sometimes we forget about him because he missed most of the season. And Bam, again, I don't think he gets nearly enough credit. But this is just, aside from the fact that I thought they were going to get swept and they pull off a win here, if they could just make this a little bit of a series and make the Celtics work, right? Like, because everybody, I think, penciled them in for, if not a sweep, then a gentleman's sweep. If you make them win, like work, and you pick up one more game in Boston or in Miami when the series shifts to Miami, now all of a sudden, like, Boston's in its own head. The Celtics fans are freaking out again because they've seen this play out before with the Heat. And then even if you get out of the series, okay, now like you had to go further into this against the Heat than you probably would have wanted to. So credit to the Heat. This is fun. I'm loving this now.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely not going to be the first round cakewalk that I'm sure the Celtics and their fans were hoping for. Having a tough battle in the first round is tough as you continue to go deeper and deeper into the playoffs. Nobody wants it, but it is what it is. Miami's definitely going to give Boston hell. But speaking of Boston and Miami, this is the perfect segue because once upon a time, a player, you might have heard of him. His name is LeBron James. He played for the Miami Heat. Big 3, won a couple rings, just a small moment in NBA history. But when we talk about the Boston Celtics, there's a guy by the name of Paul Pierce. He also once played for a pretty good Boston Celtics team. They won a ring, I think, But Paul Pierce is the gift that keeps on giving in his retirement because, as we know, The Athletic released their polls over this past few week, most underrated player, most overrated player, who would you rather start a franchise with? And there's a poll, who's the greatest player of all time? There's 133 votes casted. Michael Jordan came in at number 1. LeBron James right behind him at 42%. Michael Jordan had 45. Kobe Bryant with 9.8%. Not enough votes, if you ask me, but that's a different conversation. Then you see Steph Curry. Then you see Magic Johnson. But the name that really got people like talking is Paul Pierce because he got a vote. Well, everybody was kind of wondering who in the hell voted for Paul Pierce. Well, if you ask Paul Pierce himself, he said it was LeBron James. He goes, quote, "What if LeBron voted for me? I did play against him. He must think something. What do you think about that? We had a lot of battles. Come on now. We had some tough battles. It could have been LeBron. It wasn't LeBron, Paul.
Spoiler, it was not LeBron. You know what? I saw this and I was like, this is exceedingly dumb. Whoever did it, I think like maybe fell on their computer accidentally. I'm sure that you saw this yesterday because we were talking about it in our text chain. The sixth man of the year voting came out. Naz Reid just barely inched out Malik Monk. It was like one of the closest sixth man of the year votes ever. He won by 2 votes. But at the bottom of the rankings, somebody voted for Bojan Bogdanovic, who plays for the Knicks. And we believe that it was an accident and that they meant to vote for Bogdanovic. And I think that that's what happened here. There must have been some sort of like clerical error. Perhaps there's another Paul or Pierce that we have forgotten about that somebody meant to vote for. I don't, or maybe like Paul Pierce paid somebody to vote for him. It doesn't make any sense.
I really just want the level of delusion that Paul Pierce has, because they say that delusion is a key to kind of manifesting a lot of your dreams. If you already think it about yourself,
who says this?
By byproduct, the universe will grant it to you. For you to think that LeBron took time out of his schedule to cast a vote for you as the greatest player of all time, and not only think it, but then go on record and share it with the world that what if it was LeBron? Paul Pierce, don't ever change, because that level of delusion is not only hilarious, but it is the key to manifesting just dreams that become reality. Like, I am very much, I think it's the dumbest, most hilarious thing I've heard in a very long time. But I'm also like, listen, live in your delusion, Paul Pierce. Who am I to tell you otherwise? Like,
where did you get this thing about if you live your delusion, you can manifest it? Who says
so
that?
they say, like, if you're in order to manifest like some of your dreams, you have to be somewhat delusional. So like, if you, I don't know, if you play basketball, for example, like, some of the delusion is thinking like you're going to make it to the NBA because only 1% of players make it to the NBA. So it's just like kind of living in that mindset that you're already the best of the best, and you're going to, so I give him props for, being comfortable in his delusion. It wasn't LeBron, Paul. It wasn't LeBron.
It wasn't LeBron. Also, producer Aaron points out a very good point. So they pulled all these NBA players. Yeah. The chances that LeBron participated in the athletic poll are also like,
exactly,
nil. Like, who's getting LeBron on the phone to be like, all right, LeBron, I'm going to need you to run through, like, do you think Rudy Gobert is overrated? Like, and while you're at it, do you want to cast a vote for Paul Pierce?
Listen, the delusion is delusion. And speaking of delusion, let's head to Philly, because
don't like that transition.
Game 3 tonight, Philadelphia Knicks lead the series 2-0. Now, obviously, as we know, the Philadelphia 76ers filed a grievance about the officiating in Game 1 or Game 2 of the series so far. And it has come back in the L2M, the last 2-minute report, that some calls were missed, and that could have gone ahead and affected the outcome of the game. Now, I think this is perfect timing. I think this is a great game plan from the 76ers. You go ahead and you file a grievance. It worked out in your favor. And now the officiating is going to be extra tight, and maybe just tight enough that it swings in your favor for Game 3. What do you make of this? You were on my side. You weren't very much happy with your 76ers filing the grievance to begin with. You thought it was a little bit corny, but now that you see that the report has come out that calls were missed, do you change your mind a little bit on them filing it?
Two things can be true. I mean, the other night when Tyrese Maxey won Most Improved Player, he was asked about this before the playoff games that night. He was on Inside the NBA, and Ernie Johnson asked him about it, and he was like, look, I think I did get fouled, but there were other reasons why we lost that game. There were other opportunities to win that game, and like they missed some shots that they could have made. The foul disparity wasn't significant. It was only +1 free throw attempts to the Knicks. They took 23 attempts and the Sixers took 22. The difference was that Kyle Lowry missed 2 big free throws down the stretch. And earlier in the game, Joel Embiid missed a couple of key free throws. And like, you make your free throws, you can win that game that way. You make a shot late, you can win the game that way. If you block out Hartenstein, you can win the game that way. Like, there's a lot of different ways that the Sixers could have done that. So, yeah, 2 things are true. Yes, they should have called the foul when they were holding Maxey's jersey. And also the Sixers lost the game. I mean, they could have won it in different ways, and they got to move forward. And I wouldn't be focused on the refs. Let's put it that way.
I mean, it's going to be interesting. I feel like game 3, first game away from the Garden for the Knicks. Jalen Brunson has not had a good game. He shot 27% in game 2. And, missing Julius Randle has kind of put a bigger target on his back. You don't have that, constant score that you can kind of kick the ball out to and, alleviate some of that pressure. And I think that that's one of the reasons why he has not been able to go off in the ways that he usually does. Josh Hart obviously has been a huge factor. He's averaging 14 plus rebounds, 4 plus 3-pointers, which is a lot more than what he normally gives us. But my concern about that is there's a difference between playing at home and playing away. And usually when you play at home, the 3 balls tend to fall a little bit better. You play a little bit better. It's familiar surroundings. It's a familiar feel on the court. When you're away, those shots normally, unless you're the Miami Heat, don't follow you. So my concern is going into Philly, if Josh Hart is going to be your fail safe, if you will, your fall safe, I think it is, then we're in a situation. I need Jalen Brunson to give me a little bit more than 27% because that's going to be bad.
I mean, Sixers have done 2 things there. He hasn't shot the ball as well, but also the Sixers are harassing the hell out of him. I mean, they're trapping him every time they can. They're doubling him. They're blitzing him. I mean, he's still getting shots off, but they're making it uncomfortable for him. So, I think eventually there's going to be a regression to the mean for him, or a progression of the mean in this case, where he'll like come back to shooting the way he normally has. But then the question is, can Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo keep producing at like this absolutely breakneck pace? Like their role players have been infinitely better than anything the Sixers have after Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. I am excited though to see what kind of reception the 3 Villanova guys get upon returning to Philadelphia.
I'm glad you brought that up because Jalen Brunson spoke about this very thing in the pregame presser. He said, quote, "In their eyes, we are not a Philly school, but when we win, apparently we're a Philly school." Listen to this.
In their eyes, we're not a Philly school, but when we win, apparently we're a Philly school, so.
John, you are kind of a Villanova hater. You say it's not a real Philadelphia school. And it's not
about this though?
I'm sorry, it's not in the city. It's not in the city of Philadelphia. It's in the outskirts. So, I mean, what do you make of Jalen Brunson's comments? Explain it to me as someone from New York, because I don't understand.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So that's what I was going to say. I don't know how much you know about this. So in Philly, there's a group of basketball schools called the Big Five. Okay. And there's Villanova, which is traditionally the most successful school. Okay. And then there's Temple, Penn, St. Joe's, and LaSalle. LaSalle's where I went. All of these schools are in the city proper. Villanova is on the outskirts in a surrounding county. It's in Delaware County. So it's like 12 miles from the city center, basically. So people still think of Villanova as part of the Big Five because it is, but when Villanova succeeds and does well, we like to say that it's not a Philly school. In the same way that, do you remember when Kobe was with the Lakers and he would be at a Dodgers game or whatever, and people were like, he's not even from Philly. He grew up on the main line, which is technically right outside the city. The thing though is, I went to a neighboring school from Kobe. He was a year younger than me. And I'm from Philly. I grew up in that same area as him, right? Like people from South Jersey claim Philly, people from Delco and Montco and Bucks County claim Philly. They just like to give heat to Villanova guys because it's like the ritzy school. It's where all the kids with money go. It's not an Ivy League school, but it could be. It's kind of like the Duke of Philadelphia.
Look, does Jalen Brunson have a point though? Is it only a Philly school when they win, but not when they're not winning?
Well, yeah, because when they win a championship, then people go, all right, good for you, Villanova. We're happy for you. We want you to do well. But mostly everybody, they're top dogs for the college basketball in Philadelphia and have been for a while because those other schools used to be relevant and they're all Division I schools, but they've fallen off. And so you like to hate the team on top. You like to punch up. And Villanova has been up for a while. And also the other day after the Game 2 win for the Knicks, Villanova men's basketball's proper Twitter account tweeted out a congratulations with all their stats. And people were like, what the hell is this?
They did. And Philadelphians were not feeling it.
No.
And they were like, they're not even from Philly. They didn't even go here. It's going to be an interesting game 3 and game 4 for the Villanova Wildcats, the Nova Knicks, if you will.
Nova Knicks.
And the Nova Knicks returning to Philly, even though they're not really Philly, but we'll see how that goes.
The Sixers are favorites tonight, by the way, 5.5 point favorites. I don't like it.
Listen, I think it's game 3 is going to be an interesting one. Speaking of game 3 and interesting, the Lakers and the Nuggets are going to be playing their game 3. And if you were LeBron James, you may or may not be that thrilled about it. We'll talk about it right after the break.
And they're starting to get in the groove. So impressive.
Lock your schedules. Aces are coming to CBS Sports Network.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Ashley here, John here, and we're talking about game 3s. We just finished recapping game 3 or looking ahead to game 3 of 76ers Knicks and throwing in some Villanova lessons for me because I was very confused what the beef was. But we're going to move on now to the West Coast and the Lakers and Nuggets. I just feel like the Lakers want this series to be over. I'm exhausted for them. Jared Vanderbilt and Christian Wood are ruled out. So once again, the Lakers are at another deficit with depth that they already kind of don't have. But there's a lot of things that have been going on between game 2 and game 3. As we know, the big 3 of D'Angelo Russell, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, they had a good game, a great game, if you will. Game 2, you had 26 from James, 32 from Anthony Davis. Russell gave you 23, but it was not enough. The Lakers even shot better from the field and from the 3 than Denver, and they still lost. Well, Anthony Davis, after the loss to the Nuggets, was not very high on his head coach, Darvin Ham. He said, quote, "We have stretches where we don't know what we're doing on both ends of the floor." And well, Darvin Ham had this to say about that.
I mean, I just think sometimes the plays don't turn out the way you think they should. And, the frustration sets in a little bit, but I don't think it's for us not being organized. I think we have incredibly talented coaches all along our staff. We pride ourselves, whether it's a practice, a shoot around, a film session, a game, whatever, we pride ourselves on being highly efficient and organized. So I just chalk that up to being frustrated. It's an emotional game, the way it ended and all of that, but I'll agree to disagree on that one.
I agree to disagree on that one. John, the Lakers are fighting for their lives in more ways than one. I mean, to go ahead and have a game where you play very, very well, like all the stats I just named before that clip, still not enough. You have Anthony Davis going to the podium, kind of throwing his head coach under the bus, whether you want to say directly or indirectly.
Backed it up too.
Yeah, and Darvin Ham kind of has to go ahead and defend himself and disagree with his player, which means there's contention in the locker room. I mean, this is not great going into LA for game 3, game 4. It's looking like a sweep again.
I mean, it could. Yeah, it definitely could. Look, if they were going to win a game now that they've lost 10 in a row to the Nuggets, it would have been game 2. They did everything that they possibly could do except for hold on to a 20-point lead. And then they lost in abject fashion where Jamal Murray hits a game winner and then Anthony Davis gets swallowed up in the celebration. Like, talk about adding insult. Well, adding insult to injuries. Like he's swallowed up by their celebration. It was embarrassing, but I don't blame him for being upset about that afterwards. I do think it's going to add fuel to the fire for all those Lakers fans who have been asking for Darvin Ham to hit the bricks for a while now. Yeah. I'd be shocked if Darvin Ham is back next year.
Do you agree with what Anthony Davis said? I mean, listen, you can look at it from 2 perspectives, right? AD, great game. LeBron, great game. Russell, great game. All those guys plus 20. They did their job. But then again, losing a 20-point lead, how much of your job did you actually do? But how much do you put that on the players and how much do you put that on the head coach? And I think that's kind of where the contention is, because I think that to Anthony Davis, we lost that 20-point lead because you as the head coach didn't do your job. So I'm curious on where you stand on, his feelings towards Darvin Ham.
Yeah, I mean, so coaching is really difficult to parse from the outside. I wrote a story back when I was with the Ringer about how little the NBA there's a preponderance of information. There's stats on everything. If you're curious enough, you can find out anything you want because they all of it is charted, how far they run, how fast they run, different stats in different situations. For all of it is player and situational though. And aside from like ATOs and slobs, we don't really know a lot about coaching. Like we just don't have enough info. It's basically, this untapped frontier in terms of us from the outside trying to figure out what's actually happening on the inside. So it's secondhand information. You're getting Anthony Davis saying, hey, we're not prepared. And then you're getting Darvin Ham going, no, of course we're prepared. So only those guys in the locker room really know what kind of coaching Darvin Ham is giving them. I do think that it's like red flag, sirens should be going off. If right after a big loss like that, Anthony Davis is not so subtly tossing the coaching staff under the bus. I mean, look, you blow a 20-point lead, people are going to start pointing fingers for sure.
At least he didn't throw the water
his.
boy and ball boy under the bus like Doc Rivers, At least the coach is more acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not great. Like you don't want to go back into game 3 and be like, all right, not only did we just lose the 10th straight game to the Nuggets, who are the defending champions and have the best player in the world on their team, but on top of that, now we're all bickering. Like it's that the vibes are real bad.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, right? Looking at game 3, it does look like the beginning of the end for the Lakers, but that kind of opens up a different conversation, right? Because when we talk about the Western Conference, we've been having this conversation all season, especially post All-Star break, where the changing of the guard, I feel like happens every 10 years in the NBA, and we're seeing it happen now, specifically in the Western Conference. The East is a little bit different because I think there is just a huge discrepancy from the good teams and the really bad ones. But in the West, you see the teams that used to be the top dogs, the Warriors, the Lakers, the Suns, they're very much struggling. They were struggling in the regular season. They're struggling in the postseason. And you see the younger teams, the Timberwolves, OKC. The Clippers are kind of like the middle of the pack right now. So I'm not going to put them in the conversation. But you see that changing of the guard happen. So with LeBron getting older, the Lakers not looking like they're going to be able to produce another championship for him in his final years. And you're also looking at the Suns. They're down 0-2. They look really, really bad. Like they just look abysmal. Against, the Timberwolves in first round. It's going to be the first time since 2004, since 2005 that Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, let's go ahead and assume the last two don't win their series, will appear in round 2. So it starts to get you wondering, like, is the next face of the league coming sooner rather than later? And some of the names, obviously, that have been thrown into the conversation, Anthony Edwards, Shea, Luka, Jokic, Tatum's kind of borderline, I feel like. Embiid's kind of borderline. He's 30 at this point. And Embiid's obviously, Tatum's obviously borderline for different reasons. Wemby, Giannis, he's a little bit older too. Who's the next face of the league? And are we already in that chapter of the NBA?
Yeah, I think we've been in that chapter for a while. I mean, to think about, I'm not ready to say that the Suns are cooked just yet, but for sure, the Lakers are not going to get out of this series. So you can go ahead and say that for the first time in 20 years, you're not going to have Steph and or LeBron in the second round of the NBA playoffs. But both of those teams, aside from like the bonus championship and the bubble championship that the Warriors and the Lakers won respectively, I feel like we've been barreling towards this for a while now. And you just rattled off all the players that could be heir to the throne. And there's a whole bunch of really fun, good. It's not like the NBA is in dire straits here. We're like, oh no, LeBron's going to be done soon. It sucks that Steph Curry's not going to be in the second round. LeBron's not going to be in the second round, but there's all these other really fun, interesting players, teams, and storylines that I mean, like watching Joker play basketball is an absolute delight. This guy, if you saw him down at the YMCA, you'd be like, what is that dude doing on the floor?
I'm about to cook him. Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's like Woody Harrelson. They're like, give me the chump, right? From White Men Can't Jump. There's no way. And then he just comes out there and just like absolutely torches everybody. Anthony Edwards, Ash, I have loved this kid for a while. He's 22 years old, but the leap that he is taking so far this season, especially since Cat went down and then game 1 of the playoffs, I thought he was really good in game 2, even though he didn't shoot it very well. SGA last night, like the NBA is in great shape. There's a million guys. We're going to see Wemby in the playoffs eventually. There's a million guys who could take this over. We didn't even mention Ja.
It is right, Ja. It is interesting to me, right? Because first of all, out of the names that I mentioned, only 2 of them are American born. Well, 3 if you include the guys from Canada. So
You
SGA.
Wait, you have to stop. You did this before. They're
Canada's
Canadian.
America to me.
That doesn't
It's the
count.
same thing.
It's not. It's a whole different
Okay, so
country.
3 of
You got to
them
bring
are
a
not.
passport.
Only 3 of them are American born then. Or not American born rather. But it is interesting because when we talk about the face of the NBA, people say that it can't be Embiid because he's too old. Embiid's 30, but then people still throw the names of Giannis and Jokic in there. They're only a year younger at 29. So I'm always curious why that exception is made, one, and then two, is there an age limit to being the face of the league? Because when you think about LeBron, he came in out of high school, so super young. When you think about Kobe, came in out of high school, super young. Jordan, yeah, he did a couple years in college, but he was still under the age of 25. So you had a lot